The morning I discovered everything. The coffee was still hot when my world collapsed. I remember the exact temperature of the mug in my hands, that perfect warmth that sits somewhere between scalding and comfortable, when I pulled up my bank account on the tablet my daughter had given me for Christmas. I remember the morning birds outside the kitchen window. I remember the smell of the toast I had burning in the toaster. I remember all of it with the kind of crystalline, almost cruel clarity that your mind reserves for the moments that split your life into before and after. The balance on the screen read $47. $47. 3 days ago, that account had held $286,000. My name is Daniel Whitmore. I am 68 years old. I spent 41 years driving a school bus, coaching Little League on weekends, fixing my own plumbing, eating leftovers so my kids could have new shoes, and painfully carefully, saving every dollar I could squeeze out of a modest life. That $286,000 was not inherited money. It was not lucky money. It was the accumulated sacrifice of a man who never once took a vacation to Hawaii, never bought a new car when a used one would do, and who ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for the better part of 3 decades. It was gone. And I already knew in the sick, hollow way that a parent always knows, exactly where it had gone. The boy I built. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus Daniel Whitmore was born on a Tuesday in October, 39 years ago, during a thunderstorm so violent that the hospital lost power twice before he entered the world screaming. My wife Gloria said it was a sign. She meant it as something poetic and beautiful, her way of saying our son had arrived with electricity in his blood. She was right, just not in the way she imagined. From the beginning, Marcus was the kind of child who made rooms go quiet when he walked in. Not from menace, but from magnetism. He had my wife's dark eyes and her easy laugh, and he could charm the frost off a January morning. Teachers loved him. Neighbors loved him. The entire congregation at First Baptist loved him when he was cast as Joseph in the Christmas pageant 3 years running. He was that kid, the one everyone pointed to and said, that boy is going to do something. And for a long time, I believed them. I believed it the way only a father can believe in a son, completely, stubbornly, against all mounting evidence. The trouble started in his mid-20s. Small things at first, a loan that was never repaid, a business venture that evaporated, a series of jobs held for 3 or 4 months before some vague falling out with management. I filled the gaps. Every father fills the gaps. That is what fathers do, and I told myself it was temporary, that Marcus was still finding his footing, still becoming the man I knew he was capable of being. But the gaps got bigger. By 35, Marcus had borrowed, and I used that word with the full awareness that it stopped meaning what it's supposed to mean somewhere around his 30th birthday, close to $40,000 from me. $40,000 given in installments disguised as emergencies. A car repossession here, a medical bill there. An eviction notice. He showed up waving at my door on a Sunday morning with his youngest daughter in his arms, and what was I supposed to do? Turn away my own grandchild? I did not turn them away. I never turned them away. My daughter, Patricia, warned me. My brother Warren warned me. My late wife's sister, Claudette, looked me dead in the eye at Gloria's funeral and said, "Daniel, that boy is going to be the thing that breaks you." I loved them all and heard none of them. Because Marcus was my son. He was the baby I had rocked at 3 in the morning. He was the little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest watching football. He was the person I had poured more love into than I had ever poured into anything else in my life, and I was not ready to accept that the vessel I'd been filling all those years had a hole in the bottom. The access. Here is how it happened. Here is the part that still makes my hands shake when I let myself think about it too carefully. 8 months before that morning with the coffee, Marcus came to me with a new kind of emergency. He had found a business opportunity, a real one this time, he insisted. A logistics company that was selling a partial stake to private investors. The numbers were extraordinary. He needed capital, and he needed it quickly, because these things don't wait. He needed me to co-invest with him, to partner with him, and he had printed out documents that looked professional enough to make my untrained eye feel reassured. I told him I wasn't ready to do that. I told him my savings were not investment money. They were security money, end-of-life money, the cushion between me and a very uncomfortable old age. He came back 3 more times. He brought the grandchildren on the 3rd visit. He sat across from me at this very kitchen table and told me that this was the one, Dad. This was the thing that was going to let him pay me back. All of it, every dollar he'd ever borrowed, plus returns. He was going to make me proud. He just needed access. Not the money itself, he explained carefully. Just access to the account so he could move quickly when the window opened. He needed to be added as an authorized user, for efficiency, for speed. He showed me more documents. He used financial language I barely understood. He brought me a coffee from the good place downtown, the one with the lavender syrup I liked, and he sat across from me with his mother's eyes, and I signed the paperwork. I signed the paperwork. That is the sentence I have rehearsed in my head 10,000 times since that morning. Not with self-pity, because self-pity has never been something I could afford, but with the careful, devastating honesty of a man who needs to understand exactly what happened so he can live with it. I signed the paperwork because I loved my son more than I trusted my own instincts. The account, the transfer, the Instagram post. The bank confirmed it within an hour of my call. 4 transfers executed over 2 days, 6 days before my discovery. The largest was $180,000, routed to an account in Marcus's name that I had never seen before. The remaining $106,000 had gone out in 3 separate transfers of varying amounts. A pattern, the bank's fraud specialist explained to me with professional delicacy, that was sometimes used to avoid triggering automatic alerts. My son had planned this, he had planned it carefully. And then, and this is the detail that I could not have invented, the detail that made Patricia actually put her head down on my kitchen table when I told her Marcus had posted on Instagram. A photograph of his feet in the sand, a turquoise ocean in the background, a cocktail with a tiny umbrella in his hand. The caption read, "Finally living." Life is short, people, stop waiting. The location tag said Turks and Caicos. He had posted it the morning after the final transfer. $47 and a photograph of his feet. The days that followed. I will not pretend I was strong in those first days. I was not strong. I sat in my kitchen for most of the first afternoon without moving. My neighbor, an older woman named Bev who has fed me casseroles since Gloria died, came over at some point, and I apparently did not answer the door, because she let herself in with the emergency key and found me sitting exactly where she'd left me 3 days prior, just sitting, staring at a wall. She called Patricia. Patricia arrived within 2 hours, driving the 90 miles from her house with her husband and both kids in the car, and when she walked through my door and saw my face, she didn't say anything at all. She just put her arms around me and held on, and I cried in a way that I had not cried since the night Gloria passed, a kind of crying that doesn't really have sound, the deep, silent kind. When the crying was done, Patricia sat down across from me, in the same chair Marcus had sat in when he charmed me out of everything, and she said, very quietly, "Dad, what do you want to do?" And something shifted in me. Not loudly, not dramatically, no thunderclap, no music swelling, just a quiet, cold, absolute clarity settling in behind my eyes like the first frost of November, steady and total and permanent. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. The attorney. Her name was Margaret Osai, and she had been practicing estate law for 30 years. Patricia had found her, and I will be grateful for that referral until my last breath. Margaret was a compact woman with reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain, and a habit of folding her hands on her desk when she was about to say something important. She had the demeanor of someone who had seen every permutation of family dysfunction that money could produce, and had stopped being surprised by any of it somewhere around 1998. I sat across from her and told her everything. I did not leave anything out. I told her about the loans, the authorized account access, the transfers, the Instagram post with the tiny umbrella drink. I told her about the years of filling gaps. I told her about Marcus at 8 years old and Marcus at 39. I told her about Gloria and what she would have thought, and what she would have done, and how I would never, in 1,000 years, be able to untangle my grief for my son from my grief for my wife, because he was the piece of her I had been holding onto all this time. Margaret listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she folded her hands. "Daniel," she said, "let's talk about what justice looks like for you." We talked for 2 hours. We talked about legal action, which was available to me, though the recovery process would be long and complicated and emotionally costly in ways that money couldn't capture. We talked about family. We talked about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like, and what I wanted to leave behind, and who I wanted standing at my bedside if it came to that. And then we talked about my will. The document. I had written my original will 11 years ago, when Gloria was first diagnosed. It was a straightforward document, the kind that most people write. Everything split evenly between the children, a few personal items designated to specific people, the house to be sold and the proceeds divided. Marcus was set to receive half of everything. We rewrote it that afternoon. The new document was not an act of rage. I want to be clear about that, because rage is a fire that burns the person holding it as much as anyone else, and I have no interest in burning. What Margaret helped me construct was an act of clarity. A document that reflected reality as it actually existed, rather than the reality I had spent decades hoping would materialize. Patricia received the house, the remaining assets, and was named sole executor of the estate. Marcus received a letter. The letter, drafted by Margaret, refined by me over 3 subsequent sessions, read and reread until every word was exactly what I meant and nothing more, said the following in plain language. I love you, I have always loved you. I will love you until I am no longer capable of it. But love is not the same as enabling, and I understand now, too late for some things and perhaps not too late for others, that the most loving thing I ever should have done was let you face consequences earlier. I am not punishing you with this document. I am simply no longer protecting you from yourself. The protection I offered you was not kindness. It was fear, my fear of losing you, dressed up as generosity. I release that fear now. What you do with your life from this point is entirely your own. I hope you choose well. I signed both the will and the letter on a Wednesday morning in April, with Margaret and her assistant as witnesses. I felt, for the first time in months, like I could breathe. The reckoning. Marcus came home from Turks and Caicos 10 days after I had visited Margaret's office. He did not come to see me. He called, and his voice had the particular texture I had learned over decades to recognize, the slightly elevated warmth, the forward-leaning energy, the tone of a man who has rehearsed his opening and is ready to perform it. He wanted to come over. He had things to explain. The business situation had been more complicated than expected, but it was still moving forward and he needed just a little more time, and if I could just hear him out. I let him talk for a while. Then I said, Marcus, I've been to see an attorney. Silence. I've also filed a report with the bank, and I've spoken to a detective in the financial crimes unit. I don't know yet what they'll do with it. That's up to them. But I want you to know that I know exactly what happened, and I know it was not an accident and was not a misunderstanding. More silence. Then in a smaller voice, the voice that had always worked on me, the young voice, the voice of the boy who fell asleep on my chest. Dad. I'm not calling to fight with you, I said. I'm not calling to be cruel. I'm calling because you're my son and I will always tell you the truth, even when it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I've changed my will. Patricia knows. Warren knows. The people in your life who need to know will know. I'm not hiding what happened. The call ended shortly after that. The fallout. I will not pretend the fallout was clean or simple, because nothing in families ever is. There were relatives who took sides. There were phone calls I didn't answer and messages I read carefully and then set down without responding to. There was a period of about 6 weeks where the family felt like a building after an earthquake, still standing, but with new cracks visible everywhere, and nobody quite sure which walls were still load-bearing. Marcus's oldest daughter, my granddaughter Simone, called me on a Sunday evening and cried for 20 minutes. She was not defending him. She was grieving the version of her father she had needed him to be, and grieving the grandfather she was afraid she might lose in the wreckage of all of this. I told her she was not losing me. I told her that whatever her father had done had nothing to do with her, and that she could call me every Sunday for the rest of my life if she wanted to, and I would always answer. She calls most Sundays now. Patricia became, in the aftermath of everything, something I hadn't fully seen before, not just my daughter but my person, the one who showed up, the one who drove 90 miles without being asked, the one who sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked what I wanted, and then helped me figure out how to want it. I had always loved Patricia with everything I had, but in those months I came to know her in a different way. The way you know people when the roof comes off and you see them clearly for the first time, without shelter or pretense. She is extraordinary. I don't know why it took a catastrophe to fully see it, but I see it now, and I will not stop saying it. Where I stand. My savings are largely gone. The legal process to recover what Marcus took is ongoing, slow, and uncertain. I have adjusted my retirement expectations in ways that require some creativity and no small amount of humility. Bev still brings casseroles. The birds still sing outside my kitchen window in the morning. I am 68 years old and I have learned, at significant cost, the difference between love and surrender. I loved Marcus so completely, so overwhelmingly, that I confused my love for him with the obligation to protect him from every consequence his choices produced. I thought that was what a father did. I thought that was what love looked like. I know better now. Real love, the kind that actually helps a person, sometimes looks like a closed door. Sometimes it looks like a letter instead of a check. Sometimes it looks like an old man sitting across from an estate attorney, rewriting a document in the most honest language he has ever used in his life, because honesty is the last true gift he has left to give. I don't know what Marcus will do. I hope, with the same stubborn, irreducible hope that has survived everything else, that he will find his way to something real. I hope that somewhere in the ruin of what he did, he will find the bottom, and that the bottom will be firm enough to stand on. I hope he calls me someday, not to explain or to ask for anything, but just to talk. Just to be my son again, the way sons and fathers are supposed to be. If he does, I will answer. But I will not be waiting by the phone. My name is Daniel Whitmore. I am 68 years old. I drive myself to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, and I eat peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, and on Sunday evenings my granddaughter calls and we talk for as long as she needs. That $47 turned out to be enough after all. Not because it bought anything, but because it finally, at long last, bought me the truth.